Growing up in a humble family, I, a 26-year-old woman, am married to my college friend William, also 26. We reconnected at a mutual friend's party after graduation and have been inseparable for almost 4 years, including our marriage. Despite my love for William, my relationship with his mother, Ellie, has been strained. Ellie, a single mother who raised William by herself, has always been dismissive of me due to my modest financial background. My parents worked tirelessly to support me and my 4 sisters. My father was a housekeeper, and my mother took on various odd jobs. We never felt ashamed of their occupations. They were honest and hardworking, instilling in us values of pride and integrity. The tension with Ellie became apparent the first time we had dinner with her. Upon learning of my father's job, her reaction was visibly cold and judgmental. From then on, her attitude was subtly dismissive. She avoided physical contact and used different, less attractive dinnerware for me. Despite feeling this could be my imagination, her actions spoke louder. The disparity was also evident in the gifts she chose. While she could afford lavish gifts, as seen when she bought William an expensive watch and sent her receptionist on a trip to Hawaii, the gifts she gave me were cheap and clearly less thoughtful, including a knockoff designer bag priced visibly at $100. This pattern of behavior was deeply hurtful, and regretfully, I didn't discuss it with William initially, struggling with how to address such a personal and painful issue. The situation escalated when Rich Mill, a wealthy acquaintance, targeted me at a party. Known for her disdain towards those less affluent, she mocked me by introducing me as a mere housemate in a video she posted online, aiming to humiliate me because of my background. However, my husband William's response to this incident was profound and silenced her, standing up for me in a way that left no room for further mockery. In these challenges, both with Ellie and Rich Mill, the underlying issue of class prejudice has been painful, but has also reinforced the value and support found in genuine relationships, like my marriage with William. We continue to navigate these dynamics together, committed to respecting and uplifting each other regardless of external judgments. I come from a family of finance majors, including myself and my sisters, who all pursued college degrees funded through student loans. This educational journey led us to secure respectable positions in various fields. I landed a job in digital strategist. Despite my career success, I've always harbored a dream of starting my own business. Personal relationships, especially familial ones, can be complex, and mine with my mother-in-law, Ellie, is no exception. Initially, I refrained from voicing my concerns about her to my husband, William, before we got married. I hoped with time she would come to accept me. Unfortunately, that acceptance never came, and addressing it became increasingly uncomfortable. A few months into our marriage, I gathered the courage to tell William how inferior Ellie made me feel, suspecting it had something to do with my family background and my father's profession. William was understanding and promised to talk to Ellie to resolve the tension. However, his efforts were in vain. When confronted, Ellie vehemently denied all accusations, resorted to emotional outbursts, and claimed she had always been warm towards me. This only reinforced my view of her as manipulative, despite appreciating William's attempts to mediate. We reached a compromise where William would maintain his relationship with his mother, while I would keep my distance until I felt ready to engage with her again. Ellie clearly resented me for the distance in their relationship, but it was a necessary boundary for my peace of mind. Though we would see each other at family gatherings, Ellie and I mostly stayed out of each other's way, and this arrangement worked for a while. The situation took an unexpected turn when Ellie invited me to her 47th birthday celebration, expressing a desire to reconcile and admitting her past mistreatment towards me. I was hopeful, thinking she had genuinely begun to accept me into the family. However, this hope was shattered when I arrived early as requested, and she humiliatingly introduced me as her housemaid to the waitstaff, even recording the act and laughing, treating it as a prank. This was a new low for Ellie, and feeling utterly humiliated, I left in tears, returning to an empty home and facing the stark loneliness of my situation. This incident not only deepened my resolve to maintain distance from Ellie, but also left me reflecting on the emotional cost of such toxic familial relationships, despite my professional aspirations and achievements. After an emotionally draining evening, I found myself sobbing myself to sleep, overwhelmed by the humiliation I had suffered at my mother-in-law, Ellie's hands. Hours later, I woke up to find William beside me, his fingers flying over his phone. Curious, I asked why he had missed the party, prompting him to turn his phone to show me a video Ellie had posted online. Labeled as a prank gone wrong, she had edited out my tears, attempting to downplay her cruelty. Yet the intent to humiliate me was clear, and tears welled up in my eyes once more. William, seeing my distress, assured me he was doing everything to get the video removed. He was adamant that Ellie would regret her actions deeply. She wasn't responding to his frantic messages or calls, likely preoccupied with the party, but he was certain she'd soon reach out, wondering about his absence. He vowed that he would make this a lesson she'd never forget. True to his word, when Ellie finally called, the conversation was heated, and while I won't repeat the harsh words he used, William's anger was palpable. He concluded the call with a stern promise to pursue legal action against her for her demeaning stunt. After hanging up, he turned to me, full of apologies for not taking my earlier discomfort with Ellie seriously. I hadn't stressed my feelings strongly at first, perhaps downplaying the severity to William, who wasn't the most observant or sensitive to such nuances, and thus had never fully grasped the extent of Ellie's antagonism. That night, he finally understood the full breadth of what I had endured and was furious. He regretted not perceiving the signs of Ellie's behavior sooner, apologizing for what he called his own negligence. We discussed the situation extensively, and he even contacted his lawyer to explore possible legal repercussions for Ellie's actions. However, the prospect of a lawsuit for emotional distress was slim, given the lack of physical evidence of harm. I suggested that perhaps the best course of action was to sever ties with Ellie completely, rather than embarking on a likely futile legal battle. William, however, felt that simply cutting her off wasn't enough. He wanted to ensure she faced consequences and acknowledged her wrongdoing. His determination was driven by a fierce desire to defend me, which, despite the circumstances, deepened my affection for him. Though he refrained from any immediate retaliatory actions, by the next morning, William had devised a plan. He demanded that Ellie issue a public apology to both me and my family within 5 days, and it had to be a video apology. If she failed to comply, he threatened to expose her behavior to her business circle, potentially devastating her professional reputation, especially given her established position in the community. This ultimatum marked a turning point, indicating that while the road to healing from this ordeal would be long, I was not alone in it. William's support was unwavering, reflecting not just his love for me, but a commitment to uphold respect and decency within our family, no matter the personal cost. As a female entrepreneur, I had always admired Ellie's drive and success, but her recent actions contradicted the feminist values she purported to uphold. Her negative behavior could potentially tarnish her future, a fact that made William's threat against her feel all the more potent. We're currently on the second day of waiting for her response, and honestly, I'm not feeling good about the situation. It feels a bit too much like blackmail, and I've expressed these concerns to William. However, he believes this stern approach is necessary to ensure Ellie never repeats her harmful behavior or tries to upset me again. I'm uncomfortable with this tactic, feeling it's not the right way to handle things. After receiving advice from many of you, I decided to have another serious conversation with William when he returned from work. I reiterated my discomfort with using such aggressive methods just to force an apology from Ellie, which, in all likelihood, wouldn't even be sincere. I suggested we should drop the demand for an apology and simply distance ourselves from her, allowing her to live her life as long as she respects our boundaries. Surprisingly, William didn't resist this time. Instead, he broke down in tears, overwhelmed by guilt. It turns out he had been overcompensating for not addressing my initial complaints about Ellie seriously. He had watched the deleted video and realized the depth of Ellie's issues, which intensified his guilt. In his quest to make amends, he inadvertently focused more on retaliating against his mother than on listening to my wishes. Our conversation helped him see that he was repeating his previous mistake of not taking my feelings into account. Admittedly, I struggle with being assertive, which doesn't help in situations where I need to express my needs clearly. After our talk, William messaged Ellie to call off the demand for an apology. He told her that he no longer wanted any form of reconciliation or apology, effectively cutting ties with her. I'm proud of how we handled this situation together, facing the problem as a team rather than letting it drive a wedge between us. Our deep care for each other is why it was so challenging to confront these issues, but we've recognized the need to work on our communication. We've agreed to seek marriage counseling to strengthen our relationship and prevent such misunderstandings in the future. I've already started looking into counselors, hoping to begin sessions soon. This ordeal has been one of the most trying experiences of my life, and I never want to feel that way again. I'm relieved that William is distancing us from Ellie. I don't think I could face her again without being tempted to confront her more directly, and that's not a situation I want to find myself in. We're now focused on moving forward, together, and ensuring our relationship is stronger for having faced this challenge. A week has gone by, and Ellie hasn't reached out at all after William gave her that ultimatum. Even when William told her that he was calling off the demand for an apology and no longer needed one, she didn't respond. We were beginning to think she might have let it go, but we knew she wouldn't let something like this slide forever. Today, Ellie showed up at our house with her lawyer. When I answered the door, she walked in without even acknowledging me, acting like I wasn't there at all. She called out for William and demanded that he come to the living room. It was a bit ridiculous because William was in our bedroom, and I was already planning to get him, so her theatrics were unnecessary. When William came out, Ellie ordered him to sit on the couch as if she was in charge of our home. It was incredibly irritating to see her acting like this in our own house. William, frustrated, told her that he would do as he pleased and that he wasn't in the mood to speak with her, so she needed to leave with her lawyer. Ellie refused to budge, insisting that William needed to hear what she had to say. At this point, I just wanted to get the situation over with, even if it meant listening to some legal threats or whatever she had planned. So I told William to sit down on the couch just to get this confrontation out of the way. I sat beside him to make it clear that this was our space, and Ellie needed to respect that, even though she continued to ignore me. Ellie's lawyer then stepped forward and began reading out the terms of a document Ellie had prepared. The document essentially stated that Ellie wanted William to leave me. If he didn't, she would remove him from her will and leave everything to other family members, her employees, and charities. It included a list of her properties and assets, clearly intended to intimidate William into reconsidering his choice. Despite the lawyer's detailed reading, William seemed utterly unfazed. He fiddled with the ring on my finger, hardly paying attention to the lawyer's words. Once the document was read, Ellie asked William if he had made any decisions, warning him that staying with me meant forfeiting her inheritance forever. Then something quite unexpected happened. William stood up, walked over to Ellie, and gave her a big hug. With a calm smile, he said, "Goodbye, Mom." The look of triumph on Ellie's face instantly turned to shock, and I couldn't help but laugh. It was a moment of pure relief and amusement, watching her reaction as she finally acknowledged my presence for the first time. It felt like a victory for us, showing that we were united and not easily swayed by Ellie's manipulative tactics. Ellie's visit took a turn for the worse when she lashed out at me. She told me to shut up and started having a full-blown tantrum, hurling a barrage of choice words that I won't repeat here. I hadn't even said anything to her. I just pretended not to hear her, knowing it would only infuriate her more. Even William didn't argue with her. Once she began shouting at me, he suggested we retreat to our room, as it was clear his mother was having a meltdown. He didn't want to stick around to witness more of her outburst, which was becoming quite embarrassing. We calmly got up and walked back to our room, trying to ignore her screaming and cursing. Ellie then crossed a line by accusing me of being a gold digger. She claimed she should never have supported our marriage and insinuated that I was only interested in William for his money, probably because my father wasn't successful enough to provide for us. Her comments were out of line and deeply offensive, especially considering how hard my dad has worked for us. I didn't argue with her. Instead, I told her that William was rejecting her money and influence today, so clearly, I wasn't a gold digger. I emphasized that I was a working woman who didn't depend on my husband financially. I then told her to leave my house before I called the police to have her removed. After a bit of resistance, she finally left, but her visit left a sour taste in our mouths. At least now she knows not to mess with us, and hopefully she will respect our boundaries. Ellie has done something really nasty that I can't believe she thought she could get away with. About 3 weeks have passed since her last visit, and since she hadn't tried to contact us or cause any trouble, William and I thought we were done with this drama and could get back to our normal lives. We were wrong. I got a call from my parents about an hour ago, and they were upset because Ellie had paid them a visit. She barged into their home, and the things she said were appalling. She insulted my parents, calling them terrible and accusing them of raising a gold-digging, conniving person like me. But what hurt the most was when she criticized my mother for supposedly not spending enough time with us because she was busy working. Ellie also made demeaning comments about my father's profession, saying it was no surprise that his daughters were the filthiest. Hearing how upset my parents were brought me to tears. I'm furious that Ellie would attack my family like this. Right now, I'm at work, so I can't do anything about it immediately. But once my workday is over, I'm heading straight to Ellie's house. She needs to be confronted and held accountable for her actions. I've already texted William about what happened, but he's caught up with work. As soon as I can, I'm going to make sure Ellie knows she crossed a line and that her behavior is unacceptable. He hasn't replied yet, and honestly, I don't want him to join me. But I've let him know so he won't be caught off guard if Ellie calls him crying about what happened. I'm back at home after spending a few hours at Ellie's place. It felt incredibly satisfying to confront her and let her know exactly what I thought of her. When I arrived, she opened the door with a smirk on her face, which only fueled my anger. I didn't need her to say anything. I was already fuming. I pushed past her and went inside, demanding to know if she had indeed visited my parents and said all those horrible things. She answered yes, looking rather pleased with herself. That smirk on her face made me lose it completely. I yelled at her with such intensity that I swear the house shook. I asked her how she could dare to treat my parents that way. She was so taken aback by my shouting that she actually took a step back. It's almost funny now, thinking about it, because I'm usually quiet and soft-spoken. I even surprised myself with how loudly I was screaming. I called her a hypocrite and a terrible excuse for a human being. I told her she had failed miserably as a mother by putting her own selfish desires above her son's happiness, trying to tear us apart. But no matter what she did, William and I were deeply in love, and nothing could change that. I threw in a low blow by expressing my relief that her husband had passed away when William was young, implying that he might not have survived living with her. I said she was worse than any disease he could have had. That's when she started crying, but I wasn't done yet. I continued to yell at her for several more minutes until I finally ran out of steam. Seeing her sob uncontrollably was oddly satisfying. She had made me feel awful about myself and my family. And worst of all, she had insulted my parents without cause. She deserved this. After I left her house, I went straight home. About an hour later, William came back from work. He had left early thinking I would still be at Ellie's house, so he went there first. By the time he arrived, I had already left. He found the door open and Ellie curled up on the couch, crying her eyes out. I was worried that William might be upset with me for making his mother cry, especially since she doesn't usually show her emotions. But instead, he told me he was proud of me for finally standing up for myself and not letting anyone walk all over me. He gave me a hug and apologized for everything his mother had said to my parents. Then he filled me in on his brief conversation with Ellie before he came home. He told me it would likely be one of the last times he spoke to her, and from now on we would have no contact with her. If she tries to interfere with our lives again, he made it clear we would be cutting her off completely. If Ellie tries to interfere again, we will be filing for a restraining order. When William confronted her about my comments, she repeated everything, including what I had said about his father. Ellie was expecting William to side with her and finally announced that he was leaving me because I had crossed the line. But once again, she was disappointed. William told her that even though the remarks were about his father, he wasn't offended.